I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and a few days ago there was some news out basically about the first quarter earnings regarding graphic novels within the comic book industry. I was going to cover it. I was like, it's the same news as always. There's growth. I think it's 30% growth, but it's all basically due to manga. I didn't want to cover it again. We talked about it too much, but we have something to talk about with regards to this because Marvel is taking, if you can't beat them, join them approach. And here to talk with me about that is my good friend Perch. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So we know, or you and I have kind of discussed, are Marvel and DC going to, look at the manga model, what they're doing with their publishing, with their digital subscription services, and, how they're getting all this growth and apply them to their Western comic books and maybe try and adapt the best practices. We haven't really seen that, but we are seeing apparently Marvel is going to go the manga route. A few years ago, they did do this like Marvel super collaboration with Shōnen Jump, which we got this, I believe it's Deadpool Samurai series that came out of it. It got so many downloads.
Yeah.
But based on meritocracy, they decided to do a full miniseries on it. And Marvel's kind of leading into that. We're going to get this, Marvel Meow, more of this Deadpool in another series. What are your thoughts on this? I think this is interesting.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think the success of Deadpool Samurai, as soon as that had the kind of popularity it did, you knew it was going to be translated here in the U.S. at some point. So not a big surprise that it's being done there. It's a great deal for Shueisha, who's getting another check, basically for the distribution rights. So that's they're making out twice through this. That's great. But in terms of kind of overall, I think it is something that's working other places. I don't know that it will work as well in the U.S. So I'm glad they're doing it. Part of the reason why it's working so well in Japan is the distribution and the availability and where people are able to get it. Here in the U.S., they're going to translate these things, get some of this content coming out, and it's going to go to the direct market. And unfortunately, it's going to need to then compete on those shelves. It'll be okay, but it's not going to have the same growth potential it does in Japan because it's still going to the same relatively small pipe. So hopefully, part of the deal with Viz is to get it other places.
So they're kind of borrowing the content, but they're not looking at the availability, the subscription models, and how they're delivering it. And I think that's kind of one of the big mistakes here with Marvel. If you're going to look over there and look what manga's doing, I think you have to look at their business structure and how they're delivering these products to people. Obviously, they do have Penguin Random House deal coming up. They should have greater distribution opportunities in the future. But I don't know, are they actually going to take advantage of this and really start adapting this Western model?
I hope so. I don't see a lot of signs of that, although Penguin Random House may force them to do it. If this is being distributed, this is a partnership between Marvel and Viz. And I'm assuming it's using Viz's channel and their publishing. It's going to be kind of printed and distributed under the Viz Media brand as opposed to the Marvel brand. Marvel will be listed there on the cover, but it's going to be Viz's pipeline and kind of their setup. Hopefully, they get Viz into Penguin Random House or some other place where they can get this content more spots, because that's what it's going to take. But the best thing, and I know a lot of listeners may disagree with this, the best thing that Western comics could adapt from Japan is not the content, and I know people say that all the time, but it'd be the business model. It's how it's distributed. If they could do that first, that would be really good. The actual content of the comics, sure, but it's the business model that's terribly broken.
It's crazy when you think of like what Shōnen Jump provides the opportunity for them to do. They can basically get a bunch of pilot episodes, throw it into an anthology, you put it out there, and you see what hits. That's exactly how we got One Piece. That's one of the most read mangas in the world.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I'm sure they're. The crazy part about this, and it really does make me crazy, is that there's now several examples of how this is successful. Most recently with Demon Slayer, you mentioned One Piece, My Hero Academia went down this path. There's tons of examples. Even you could go back 30 years to Ranma One Half and some of that stuff and how it was distributed. And there's a proven model for how it works. The baffling thing is why more people haven't taken advantage of it and adopted it. That just it defies all reason that you see something successful go on for decades, and it's like, nope, we're not gonna learn from that.
Well, it gets frustrating, just as a customer. It feels like maybe Marvel more so than DC, but I really think both of them. I think in their minds, they get to pick who the winners are beforehand.
Yeah.
They're going to decide that this is the writer that's going to be hot. These are the characters that people are going to enjoy. We're going to make them enjoy it. And then when it doesn't work out, they just keep getting these opportunities and basically just wasting time and precious resources when you could be developing maybe 5 or 6 different things with different creators and put them out there on the marketplace ideas and let the customers decide. And I think people are, specifically the Western comic audience in North America, are tired of trying to be force-fed like these creators, like Danny Lore, Sina Grace, and others like Matthew Rosenberg is another one. I guess he's been more successful. They just decided that these are the winners and these are the creators that are good, and we get no say in it. I think that's the big problem. There's a disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways what you're describing is kind of an older publishing model. If you go back, decades, it was the publisher who had to curate this content a little bit more. It was not as easy for the customer base to pick and choose. So a lot of that was just based on the publisher making a bet on somebody and then sales determining if they win or not. And if sales are high, then things keep going. If they're not, but there's a gamble. So the good publishers got to be very good at being able to predict or pick the creators that were going to make it and hit. And, when they didn't, they lost their jobs. Or, there's plenty of examples of that with both Marvel and DC in the 70s and the 80s of, that was an art of picking the right people. But this was very much old school publishing. You picked, you rolled it out, you put your best foot forward. The challenge is that publishing in general and a lot of content distribution has moved to kind of a new media format to what you're describing, where the customer feedback comes in a lot quicker and faster. And so smart companies have learned to adapt to it very rapidly of being able to, it's sort of putting the decision in the hands of the customers, but it's accelerating the process. You still are going to make a pick and a bet on a person, but you're going to be reacting within weeks or months, as opposed to trying to king make somebody and saying, this is somebody we're confident in, and so we're just gonna kind of keep pushing projects at them for 3 years, and you're gonna take it. And that's, I think the world doesn't work that well that way anymore. Some of the names you mentioned, I mean, and to me, it always feels like you're setting that person up for failure. You mentioned Danny Lore. Danny Lore's on Champions, and now they're on several other books. Why would you do that to a new writer coming into your house? The odds of even if they do a great job, the odds of them overexposing themselves and blowing up is high. There's a very famous thing that happened in the 80s where they put George Perez on like 6 books, and he couldn't do 6 books because nobody can do 6 books. It's too much. And so it didn't work. He had to drop some titles. It was a mess. And as I recall, an editor lost their job during that period because they, stupidly they overextended Perez. And, that was dumb. But today we get these writers who have, Vidael's another one, again, maybe a great writer, but you don't throw them on multiple books right out the gate and, for multiple companies and say, this is going to turn out well. There's a capacity and there's a learning process. And you tell somebody you're on 6 books, you're setting them up for failure, whether they're a good writer or not.
Well, no writer's going to turn that down.
No, nobody in this
That's
industry
6 times they would get for 1 book.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that was the deal with Perez is like, I think he said himself, I'm not going to turn down work. And this was back when things were a little bit healthier. So like you got a guy like that, if you turn somebody down, are they, especially the way comics works, they're not going to come knocking on your door again. So it's like, why would you do that? That's a failure of editorial. It's a failure of the publishing to overextend your talent, for sure.
Yeah, I really wish we could get that kind of like that Shōnen Jump model where you put things out there, hey, and the clicks decide. as in the views decide on what maybe goes forth as a permanent series. Now, rolling back to this Marvel-Viz agreement, we're going to get this Deadpool Samurai. This is going to be essentially reprints, but it sounds like there's going to be new material coming. The other series is Marvel Meow. It's the cat, the flerken from Captain Marvel interacting with characters in Marvel. I don't imagine that's going to be a big hit. There's got to be something else in the pipeline with bigger characters, right?
I'm sure there is. I mean, it's all where are you sending these comics? I mean, if you're doing a Spider-Man teams up with the Flerken cat, and you're going to get it into the Scholastic catalog and sell it to 7 to 12-year-olds, that's probably not a bad plan. That might work there. If your plan is that you're going to do Spidey and the cat into the direct market and sell it in the comic shop next to Way of X, that's probably a stupid plan. So it just depends on where they're going to aim this stuff. I think Viz, like many companies, hopefully, is saying we do need to get some all ages content out there. We need to start capturing the children before Scholastic takes them all away from us. So let's get some content out. But it all goes back to where is it being distributed? Where are you sending this stuff? You got to get it to where the kids are.
Absolutely. So I imagine needs to be on Shōnen Jump. What's it going to take for Marvel and DC to adapt their subscription models to what they're doing over at Shōnen Jump? Get a lower price point and more new content on there that's actually going to entice more like casual readers to go in there and feel like they're getting a value add. Because I really feel like that's the hurdle that's sitting in between Marvel, DC, and success regarding digital comics.
I think it takes a massive management change. I mean, bluntly, I think you've got a lot of people in the companies who have been in comics for a long time, and they're doing it the way they know it. And that's the problem. I think there's some resistance to change, and I'm sure it's scary to adapt to a new model and disrupt and do something new, but it is necessary. And I think you've got a lot of people who've been in the industry now for decades, and they are trying to shape the industry to what they always have known. And things have changed. So we're kind of looking at either somebody's going to have to change their style and their way, which is unlikely, or they're going to have to be removed for new people to come in. But that's the problem. The comic industry is in transition, and people are either going to have to transition with it or write it down. Transition out. Yeah. And this is where we're at that moment where we're going to see some companies succeed and some companies fail, but a lot of it's going to have to do with how willing are you to adapt to new models.
I cannot wait. This is the thing. These are the changes and ideas that I think need to come into Western comics, specifically in North America, to really, reinvigorate the market, reinvigorate the industry, and really get growth. Obviously, we're seeing that on the side of manga. Now, I do have some characters that I would like to see. I think Deadpool obviously made a lot of sense with that Deadpool Samurai. I've been watching the X-Men. What is it? The anime that's on Netflix. I think that one was done really well. So, obviously Wolverine and X-Men, I think, would be really smart moves for Viz and Marvel to kind of do up a manga style project as well.
Yeah, I think. All these characters can work. I do think something very, very superhero based. I think the X-Men is a natural one. The Avengers could be very fun. There's tons of opportunity here to do something very, very superhero like. Arguably, the Teen Titans Academy book that DC is doing right now, like maybe that should have been done in a manga style with that kind of storytelling sensibilities. And by the way, for people listening, because I have this on my channel, people come in and be like, but I hate that art style. It's like, okay, that's fine. Keep in mind that at least when we're talking manga, there's two pieces to that. There's certainly the art style. There's also the storytelling style. Western comics could adapt the storytelling model without the art style for sure. They're not coupled. You can do different things. You can go to more chapter based. You can go to more, this different style. And frankly, I think one of the clues for Western comics is to at least start putting out some comics that have that manga storytelling feel. even if you're using traditional Western art.
Absolutely. If you go into a Barnes and Noble here, it's it's National Bookstore, and you go to the comic or the graphic novel section. When you see the manga section, it's so beautiful and clean, and you know exactly what's going on.
Sure.
And you go to the Western comic section, Marvel, DC, and it's pandemonium. Nothing's the same size. The trade dress are all different. You don't know what the chapters, like what order they go in. What am I supposed to read first? And manga just looks so much more inviting.
No, and I mean I've talked about this probably a ton on my channel. It's a self-inflicted wound. It's so stupid, and you don't necessarily realize how stupid it is until you go and you stare at the shelves, like you say yourself. If you put yourself in the head of somebody new coming into comics, and we need new people coming into comics when our top-selling books are barely able to crack 100,000. That's not even anywhere remotely close to the target audience out there that we need. So, but if you just, as a new reader, go and you just stare at the shelf, like I defy you to grab 3 sequential volumes of Spider-Man or Batman. Just try it. You can't. It is without, especially if you have knowledge of comics, maybe you can ascertain kind of where to go with this. But again, you're not. You're a new reader. If you're a new reader and you go to manga, you're like, this is interesting. I heard about it. I'm going to grab number 1, 2, and 3, and they're right there lined up next to each other, very clean, very easy. And meanwhile, over in Western comics, it's a zoo. Like I said, it's pandemonium. You cannot tell as a new reader. And if you're already in comics, you may dismiss that, saying, nah, that's not a big deal. It's a huge deal. That is a barrier of entry for a lot of people coming in. That's why we're seeing the audience shrink.
All right, Perch, I'm going to put you on the spot here. When I read this, I said, this is exciting. I think this is a market disruptor, something that can improve the product that Marvel's putting out, maybe add a little bit more meritocracy to the system if they're able to adapt some of these ideas that are used in Japan. Am I being naive? What does this deal mean?
I mean, it can mean those things, but if it has to include the business models, it has to include the distribution changes that they have in Japan. If it doesn't include those things, then it's just going to be more stuff on the shelf in the existing direct market. It won't be a big impact. And unfortunately, that's I'll be the negative glass half empty guy. Unfortunately, my belief is that it's going to, go to the direct market, sit on the shelf. It'll be under ordered. And in 9 months to 12 months, the management at Marvel or DC will say, well, in this case, Marvel will say, well, it was a failure. Look, it didn't sell. It didn't sell well. The Japan market's just different. I don't know what we can do. I guess that we'll stop doing they keep setting themselves up for failure they get interesting new content, they get new ideas, but then they distribute it in the same way, often overpriced. And then they say, well, there's no way it possibly could have worked. It's like, but you didn't do the important part. So I hope it does. I'm excited for this type of content. I like this partnership. Viz does a very smart job. They're one of the first ones to actually figure out a good balance between print and mobile and digital. So I really hope for it. But they've got to bring the business model with it.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.